In conversation with Philip DeLiZio. Dr. Philip DeLiZio is a retired teacher turned award-winning author. Upon his retirement, his focus became writing inspirational books for teens and young adults based on his experiences teaching, hoping his words would be inspirational and uplifting to his readers. An adult mystery based in the Caribbean, Dr. DeLiZio has a doctorate degree in education. Even though he is retired, he still tutors students in math and teaches at the local community college. He loves traveling and enjoying his morning coffee. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today, Philip DeLizio. How are you doing, Philip?
I'm doing very well. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
Right.
Very excited.
It's my pleasure as well. Quite lovely we have you on the show today. I can't wait for us to delve into the conversation. Thanks for coming on. So, Philip, I need to say that I am impressed getting to know that you've authored a lot of books. And I would like us to start today's conversation with one of your title, the name of Letter of Hope. As someone myself who love to read and write works on the theme of hope, I would like to ask you what exactly inspired you to write Letter of Hope?
So, A Letter of Hope is actually my third book for teens and young adults.
Wow.
Uh, all the teen books that I write are faith based, and A Letter of Hope, which I've got a copy of right here. Actually, I was inspired by. Well, let me tell you what the story is about.
Yeah.
14-year-old girl Kim uh, discovers that she has this compassion to help. She wants to do something. Um, so she decides to sponsor Sarita, who is an impoverished child who lives in Brazil. So through letter writing and financial support, her and Sarita become friends. Now, of course, Kim lives in the United States, Sarita lives in Brazil. So they go back and forth with letters and that sort of thing. There's also a language barrier that they have to overcome.
Wow.
But then eventually, Kim and her family travel to Brazil to meet Sarita. So that's basically the story. They become good friends. I won't give away the ending, but it took me a while. In fact, it was a friend of mine that actually suggested the storyline because I actually sponsor two children in Brazil, and the thought of writing a book about that experience never even came into my mind.
Wow.
Um, so a friend of mine said, "You do that. Why don't you write about it?" And I was like, "Well, perfect." So, Letter of Hope. It is my most recent story. It just came out in August.
Wow. That's quite amazing to know. I mean, that's a lovely introduction into becoming a writer. Sounds to me a very lovely introduction into becoming an author. So thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you also have another book in the name of Rekindled Fate. And I need to say, I love your choice of titles. Yeah. I'm a fan of your shadow. When I checked through your book set, I was like, oh, beautiful. I love his choice of titles. Yeah, I love the name Recorded Fate. And for the sake of readers who haven't read that yet, and without giving much information away, did we have a sneak of what we'd expect picking up Rekindled Fate?
So, Rekindled Faith, and of
You,
course, I have a copy here,
yeah.
was actually my first book. It's the first book that I ever wrote,
Oh,
and it was published back in March or April of this year. So, again, I'm a new
wow.
author. Um, a little bit of background. I started writing before I retired from the school system, but I waited
Wow.
till I retired to actually go through the publishing process. So, Rekindle Faith, again, it's about a 14-year-old girl who, through a chance meeting, bumps into her soon to be very best friend. But the storyline is they're complete opposites. One is, if you want to say, like privilege, comes from a well to do family. The other, not so much. She lost her parents in a car accident, lives with her grandmother. They struggle to pay bills. So they're two totally opposite young girls. They do become best friends, but then um, they have to go through uh, I'd say like bullying. Each girl has their own set of friends, and those friends are wondering why these two girls are becoming so close, even though they have nothing in common. And
Wow.
again, I won't give the story away, but like most of my books, it has a happy ending.
Oh, I love the fact that you mentioned that. And I'd like to ask you, this just popped up in my head. I love to ask you, in what way would you classify your book? Under what genre would you classify them as?
I write two different genres. The two books that we've talked about so far are teen slash young adult Christian fiction.
Oh,
They're faith based, um, and if you go into Barnes and Noble, they're in the Christian fiction section.
okay.
If you go online to Amazon or Thrift Books or Barnes and Noble, you just type in my name, it'll come up. But the books that we talked about so far are considered Christian fiction, young adult Christian fiction.
Interesting. Thank you.
The stories are sort of based on my experiences in the classroom.
Oh,
So they address
wow.
issues like bullying, peer pressure, relationships, that sort of thing.
Interesting. I love the themes encapsulated in it. Thank you.
Mhm.
And now, could you tell us a bit about your Paul Philip mystery, the name of Shadows in the Jungle, and the second series, the name of the missing piece? Who is a favorite character in this series, and which one do you not like that much? Is there one you have a fun time writing over? No, that's a tricky
Uh,
one, really.
so a lot of people ask me, well, you're writing Christian fiction for teens, but then you write these mysteries that have, maybe a murder on the side or kidnapping. How do you go from Christian teen fiction to writing mysteries that are based in the Caribbean? So I read both genres, and I like both genres.
Mm.
Even though these are mysteries, it's not the blood and gore kind of mysteries that
Um,
have some books, which is fine. Some people like that.
yeah.
So mine do have a little bit of violence, but I kind of tone it down. But Shadows in the Jungle,
Mm.
which is the second Paul Phillips. A little bit about Paul. He's a retired detective, worked in the U.S.,
Mm.
retired, moved to the Caribbean, lives on this beautiful Caribbean island, and all he wants in life is to live out his retirement.
Oh,
It
wow.
doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. The local police always end up dragging him in, and
Oh,
he's always
mm.
torn between wanting to live his retirement in peace, but then he has this deep down feeling that he always has to help his fellow man. So
Mm.
he's kind of torn between staying to himself, but then helping the people of St. Anne, which is the fictional island that he lives on.
Wow. This is quite exciting. I love you talking about this. It's been fun so far and very amazing. And picking up from what you just said, I would love to base this particular question I'd love to ask you now, based on your mystery, the mystery novel. You know, Philip, one of the most interesting things to me as a writer is to listen to readers' feedbacks. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that make literature to be a bit complex is the fact that it can be interpreted by different readers in different ways. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes some readers might get the message intended by the author perfectly fine and okay. Sometimes they might be very far, several miles away from getting the message intended by the author. Sometimes they might be close, very close to getting the message. And other times, they might hilariously misunderstand the entire message and interpret the whole book in a backward manner, upside
Mm-hmm.
down. And as interestingly fun as this sounds to me, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your works differently than you intended? How does it make you feel?
So actually, that's actually a good thing. A lot of times, people will come to me and they'll say, "Hey, I read your book," and they'll mention something that hasn't even dawned on me. Like I didn't even pick up on it. So you're right. People interpret what they read differently,
Yeah,
um, which makes the whole process fun because then I can take some of those ideas and maybe incorporate it into the next story that I work on.
yeah.
Um, but the biggest takeaway with the Paul Phillips mysteries
Mm,
is that there's always this constant struggle within himself.
Mm,
Should I just, ignore everyone, live in my little shack on the beach and be happy? Or do I have to go back into that life that I'm trying to get away from and help the people here?
mm,
So that's kind of the internal struggle. That's the theme that's in the three books that I've written so far, the three Paul Phillips books. But again, like you said, people interpret it differently. They'll come up with some character trait for Paul or maybe one of the supporting cast members that I never even thought of.
mm.
Um, there's one recurring, well, there's actually two recurring characters in the books.
Yeah,
Um, there's a local police sergeant who always gets Paul to come back and help him out.
yeah.
And then there was another officer, Zoe, but I won't give away the plot, where something happens at the end of the book. She's got to move away. But then, just for my readers to know, she does come back next year. She does come back, but we won't go any further than that.
Oh goodness. That was so fun. I love the way you ended that section. It's such a beautiful and quite funny outro you've got in there. It's coming back next year. We look forward to receiving her. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
Sure.
And I've always been fascinated about how authors, especially writer like yourself, would craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that sentences make paragraph and paragraph make pages and pages make chapters and chapters eventually make a great novel. And this always leaves me thinking about how exactly they got their idea and inspiration. And now, as far as writing is concerned, Philip, I would love to ask you, how do you get your inspirations and ideas? Where did they come from?
Sometimes they don't come. I always kid, especially I tell my son, he'll say, I'll tell him what I'm writing about now. And he'll say, so what happened? And I'll tell him, I have no idea. I haven't gotten that far yet. But I have, in talking with other authors, I have found that there's no right or wrong way to write the story. Yes,
Mm,
you have to start with the sentence and it turns into a paragraph and it turns into a chapter.
absolutely.
Some authors write the beginning and the end, and then
Mm,
they kind of fill in the middle. I just kind of start and just see where it goes. But like most other authors, I'm sure, when I get to page, 30, I don't like it. So I got to go back to page 5 and start all over again. So the inspiration is just knowing the character.
mm,
I know I'm starting to get a feel for Paul Phillips, what he's like, what he wants to do, but what he feels he's compelled to do.
mm.
And then I kind of write the story around him, and then I pull in, the bad guys,
Yeah.
and make them to where you don't like them. You may like him at first because you don't know they're the bad guy, and then
Mm,
halfway through the story, you realize that everything that they've told you is a lie.
mm,
So then I want to make it that you don't like the bad guy.
mm.
Um, I'm toying with the idea in a future book to make one of the bad people someone that you kind of feel sorry for. I haven't gotten there yet. But there's just so many different ways you can write characters.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a new author and I'm just learning all these different methods.
Yeah.
It was like when I first started teaching, I went into a classroom, had 25 students, and I looked around and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these kids? And writing is the same thing. I'm writing and I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do next? So it's a learning process. I talk to other authors, get some ideas, talk to my friends, and they kind of, give me some ideas. But you're right. You just start writing and then you just kind of see where it takes you.
That's so funny and very fun. I like it when you said, what am I supposed to do with this kid? I was going to answer perhaps to start dancing with them.
Well, and I taught for the majority of my career, I taught 8 and 9-year-old students.
Oh, interesting.
So dancing was not out of the question. I'm too old now. That's not going to happen. But 15 years ago, I wouldn't put it past me.
Oh goodness, that was quite fun. Oh, thank you so much for your answer to this question, Philip. It's been fun so far, and I've been enjoying your answer to the question. Quite great, quite amazing. Thank you.
Oh,
And
sure. Thank
also,
you.
I would like you to tell us about the making of A Light on the Horizon, which I
Mhm.
find the description of it to be quite amazing, really. And I think before I go on with that, first of all, I would like you to show the books we've mentioned so far to the camera, just so we see what it looks like. From the first book we talked about, the second,
Okay.
please, let's say the cover
Um,
designs and what they look like.
so this is my latest book, A Letter
Letter
of
to
Hope, which we talked
oh,
about.
beautiful cover.
And that's the young girl who develops a friendship with a young girl in Brazil.
Yeah,
Uh, this was actually the first novel that
it
I
is.
wrote, Rekindled Faith. And the story is pretty much the title. The two girls, they rekindle their faith in humanity because they become friends, even though everyone tells them that they shouldn't be.
Oh,
And then the second book that I wrote, and this one, well, I'm proud of all the books that I've written.
uh,
This one actually won the 2024 International Impact Award for Christian fiction. Uh,
wow.
so and this is when I go to book shows and do vendor fairs, that sort of thing. This is the book that sells the most, and I think it's a combination of maybe the cover, the description, and of course, when they hear that it's an award winner, they want to see what it's all about.
Hmm.
So this one, again, these are the Christian fiction books that are loosely based on my experiences in the classroom, and this one talks about the topic of bullying.
Oh,
A young girl, her family moves across the country. She lives in a new town, goes to a new school, and it happens to kids all the time. And as the school year starts, she meets her new best friend, Katie. But then there's bullying. A lot of
uh,
the kids in school, they don't want to accept her. She's an outsider. She just moved in. She's not from the area. So the whole book talks about bullying and how she overcomes it, how she doesn't lose faith. Um, and an interesting side note: the Katie girl that's in the book, who's the best friend, is actually based on a Katie that I know. She's a former student, and I actually dedicated the book to the real Katie. So when I go to book signings, I take her with me, and she signs the book too.
oh, wow, that's so cute.
And then, so going back to A Letter of Hope, it was Katie's mom that suggested the
Wow,
subject. So A Letter of Hope is actually dedicated to Katie's mom.
wow,
So I tried to dedicate the books to the first book was to my niece, The Pride and Joy of My Life. But I try to dedicate the books to like kids that I know, kids, students. I have my son. I dedicated a couple of books to him,
wow,
and so I try to get the kids interested in reading, and then by dedicating books to former students and then even current students, it gets them interested. They want to read the book that has their name in it.
wow,
So
yeah,
it's a way to get them to read, and then of course they tell their friends, and then their friends want to go read it. Being a former teacher, it's all about getting the kids to read because honestly, I don't think kids today read enough.
wow.
So it's just my little way of trying to get them to read more.
Oh, wow, that's quite beautiful. And I love your take on that. Thank you so much. And following up on what you just said and the books you've shown so far, I would first of all like you to tell us about the making of A Light on the Horizon. And again, I think this might sound a bit tricky because to me it sounds as if you're asking someone of the children you have or all of the kids you have, which is your favorite kid. I wanted to ask you of the books you've authored so far, which one is your favorite of all?
So trying to pick my favorite book is like trying to pick my favorite student. When I was in the classroom, I would have 100 students. I had four classes.
Wow.
There were like 25 students in each class.
Oh,
Because I only taught
okay.
the past 4 or 5 years, I only taught math.
Wow.
So I would have like 100 students, and 98 of them would always come up to me at the end of the day and say, "Mr. D, who's your favorite student?" So whoever asked me that, they were my favorite student. But then the next day, someone else would ask me, and they would be my favorite
What?
student.
That's
um,
so fun.
yes, and because you can't play favorites, and I used to tell the kids all the time, I don't have any favorites. I love you all. You all are special in your own little way.
Yeah,
So I don't play favorites. But a little side note, I did have favorite students. I just never told them. And with the books,
yeah,
they always say your first is your favorite, and I think that's true. I like all the books that I've written, or else I don't know that I've written one yet that I would say, oh, I wish I never did that. But Rekindled Faith was the first book that I've ever written.
uh,
One is dedicated to my niece, and I think that's probably the storyline. I like that storyline.
mm,
Um, so I guess because it was my first,
yeah.
that's probably like my favorite.
Uh, that's beautiful to know. Thank you so much for answering that. At least to get to know which your favorite is. It's like a plus one for our viewers. And
They're all my favorite. That's what I
that's
tell them.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And apart from the books you've authored so far, apart from the books you've mentioned so far, rather, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
Yes, actually, I'm working on several books for next year. I have now whether they all get published next year or not, I don't know because it is a process. But I currently have three teen books that I'm currently working on, but it does take a while to get them to the point
Yeah.
where I'm ready to send it to the publisher. Um, and I also have three storylines for Paul Phillips and his Caribbean adventures. Um, so I do have a lot going on. Again, I'm retired. I have lots of time. There are some days where I'll sit and write the entire day. Then it may be 2 or 3 weeks I don't do anything. So uh, probably April I'll have one of each come out, one for the teens, one for the mysteries, and then maybe two more or so towards the end of the year. Um,
Uh,
because again, being retired, I have a lot of time on my hands. And again, I started this before I retired. So some of these stories that I have written that aren't quite finished, I started a year ago.
mm,
So by next spring, I should have a couple of them ready to go. But we'll have to see what time brings.
uh, that's amazing to know, really. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks for letting us know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to ask you, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered in the process of writing your book and also ever since it got published?
Well, again, this is all new to me. I just started this year.
Yeah.
And the publishing process has been an adventure in itself. I had no knowledge of how it worked, didn't know what to expect. Um, but I think the biggest, I don't want to say problem, but the biggest issue is, um, when I send the manuscript to the publisher for them to edit and format, um, I want to make sure that because they'll change some things, but then I want to make sure that I'm aware of what they're changing because if it's a spelling error or something silly like that, that's
Mm,
fine. But I don't want them changing something in the story that's going to change the entire story.
uh,
So after they go through and do their thing, they always send it back, and then I have to sit back down and read the entire book again just to make sure. Um, and then that process, when I send it, sometimes it's 3, 4 months will be the soonest, the quickest that it's ready to go. But again, it's being new. It's a learning process. I'm still learning how the publishing world works
yeah,
and how it doesn't work. But you know, it's been an adventure, so I don't have any complaints.
yeah. That's great to know, yeah. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And before we wrap up for today, I'd like to ask you, as a published author that you are, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category? And also, where exactly can interested viewers get a copy of your book?
So the second part of your question first, the books are available everywhere online, Amazon, Walmart, Thrift Books, Barnes and Noble, all the major Goodreads, all the major online uh, retailers. And then if you're local to where I live, uh, two of the local Barnes and Nobles carry my books in store. So, but most people just go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Thrift Books, whoever has the cheapest price at the time. That was one of the things I learned was the publisher set the price,
Mm.
and I just have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Um, and then, so it's funny that you bring up other authors and questions they have, because I had the same questions before I started. But now, doing a lot of these shows and book signings,
Mm.
I'm amazed at the number of people that come up and they'll say, I'm thinking about writing a book, or I've already started writing a book, but I'm stuck. What
Yeah.
kind of, what kind of advice can you give?
You give, yeah.
And then the only advice I can give is just, stay at it. If you don't like what you've written, start over. Just keep going. But, and you hear this a lot. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And that's
Absolutely.
actually true.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's easy, and I'm not going to say that it'll take you 2 weeks.
Mm.
Like I say, the stories I'm working on now, some of them I've been writing for a year,
Yeah.
and they're still not finished. So, and then the other thing I learned is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Mm.
So when your book is finally finished, it's not going to be an overnight national bestseller.
Yeah.
Even though you've had the book 6 months or a year,
Mm.
millions of people have never heard of it. So
Absolutely.
that's a marketing opportunity.
Yeah.
So one thing I learned is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Just go through the motions, and you'll get there.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's an amazing advice you've got there. A trunk load of it that needs to be digested and taken with water. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm hoping that viewers, even including myself, would love to utilize it. And also, I left a link. You mentioned a section where we're going to have to get a book on. I think you mentioned it already.
Oh yeah. So if you go to my website, which is www.delizioauthor.com,
Okay.
all the purchase links are there. All the books are there, and not just an Amazon link. Each book has probably 5, 6, 7, 8 different links to
Wow.
different companies that sell it.
Mm.
So my suggestion would be to go through and just see whoever has the cheapest version.
Yeah.
But so my website, it has all the links, and it's available worldwide, not just in the United States.
Interesting.
I've sold copies in Great Britain, Germany, so it is available around the world. Canada,
Canada. Yeah.
yes. So it
Great.
is available around the world.
Yeah. And I left a link in the description part of this interview to Phillips' website where interested viewers can get a copy of his books directly on the other literary platform of purchase. I also left link to his social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Philip, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say it's more than awesome, very wholesome, quite fun having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Appreciate the opportunity. It was a blast, and I could go on talking forever, but
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. That was quite fun.